for all that. Just a few other announcements. Kurt is late here. So we operate with volunteers. So Kurt is a volunteer. He put this together. And next Saturday, we're going to have our first lecture on Chinese American history in Chinese. We don't know whether it's going to be Cantonese yet or Mandarin. It's going to be Mandarin. Okay, you decided it's going to be Mandarin. So if you understand Mandarin, but sold out. Right?
It is.
So it was wildly successful.
Event.
So they're doing a whole series of these talks in Chinese. I want to introduce Walter Lim. Where's Walter? Our co-president. So on behalf of Walter, we welcome you. And there's more volunteer. Anna, with Li Hong, Maxine, and where's the last one? Abby. They've been running, doing all the work at our archive. We have about 20,000 stuff. We don't know what stuff we have. Hal's also been reading some of the stuff. We're trying to make sense out of it. We're trying to scan everything, and we have Doris here, Jeannie and Frank, who's been helping us scan the last 5 years up and down the West Coast to make a lot of our archives available to researchers. And to scan our collection here at CHSA might take a year or two. So if you have time, once a week, twice a week, we need that help to make all these available to researchers. So research is really a team sport. It's pretty hard to do it on your own. So it's building up this network to help each other to tell the story. I'll introduce more people from the audience later on. We do have books for sale at half price. So you look at these, you have to buy them upstairs, but today is half price. Any question before I introduce? It's going to get crowded here, so if you're young and can stand, let the seniors sit. This is very Chinese. Okay, I wish to introduce Professor Nancy Rao. She flew here from New Jersey yesterday, her own dime. And because we can't afford to do these, our program committee says we'll do things that are free, that we won't lose money, and we don't need to use staff. So it's all basically volunteers, so we really don't have money to invite people here. She's a distinguished professor at Rutgers University. Means something to people in academic to be a distinguished professor. More importantly, she's a elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. We have less than 6,000 members worldwide. So these are our best and brightest in arts and science, and she's one of our elected members. And when I first met her, maybe 15 years ago, I said, why is someone from Taiwan that do not speak Cantonese or Taishanese want to write about Cantonese opera? And she says, no one else is doing it. And then the music of the Chinese in America should be part of American music. So when we have our catalogs about American music, it should be included. So she made this happen. So I'll let her talk about it, and we can ask questions afterwards. Nancy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Yes?
There's a up on button. Can I?
Because this is one thing we didn't try. Oh, probably not. Great. So when David was introducing me, I almost tear up. I try not to, because David was the person who introduced me to this community, and it's such a great honor to bring this story back to the community. And David had, really opened a lot of doors for me, lots of great conversation that we can't have today because they no longer, exist because of the time. So without further ado, I will, try my best to share my research, and I'm gonna sit down, I guess, because I'm gonna operate this. Okay, so I always start this story from the beginning. People normally don't know that when music actually comes from China to the United States. And this is the earliest picture we have. In fact, a little bit earlier than this, 1852, the Washington birthday, in February, we already have a record of how Chinese music was played in that particular parade. But this is from the July 4th celebration, and you can see that we have the Chinese musician on the wagon in the middle. And I think this is a remarkable picture because this was only something like 18 months after California was, becoming part of the United States, right? And they have, a lot of reason for California to really show how proud it was and how capable it was to become a really newest state in America. And what we had to show in this celebration, which is, long path of people, are actually a lot of Chinese. They were so proud of it. It's the center of this photograph. Not photograph, this painting. And you can see that I counted the number of people who are actually, Chinese people who are actually in this parade. It's the hundreds. And you look closely at the picture, you will see that there are many different classes of Chinese that are in here. There's merchant. I just learned how to use this. Wonderful. You have this merchant that are actually on these horses, really grand, and you have this Qing Dynasty, flag, and you have people who are kind of common folks, and you have people who are actually less dressed, like these are more worker type, and these are the people. So there are a lot of them, right? So all this lighting is easy to identify because you just look at the pin, right? They have the ID to show who the Chinese are. So they're at the center. And it was really the pride of California to be able to, present itself. And at the center, then, as you can see, are the musicians who can't quite figure out what they're playing, but there's certainly cymbals and some really instrument. Okay, so that's 1852, and it was July. And July was also the time that they started to talk about, we have a troupe that we have recruited. And that troupe departed from Hong Kong in July. They arrived in San Francisco in October, and they begin perform in this theater called the American Theater. And it's really interesting because if you look at the people who are actually on here, the manager, Norman Singh, is a very famous earliest leader of the Chinese community. And you also have this town chief, who's not only famous in the United States at that time, but also later became a very important figure in Shanghai after he went back. And has this Li Kong, I think he was one of the people who got involved in the beginning of Chinese newspaper, the bilingual newspaper in the United States. And I think it's very important for us to really study every single detail on this advertisement. It's obviously an indication of how early Chinese troops follow the Chinese migration, and also a very clear evidence of showing how ambitious they were. They came here not just for the Chinese community. They published advertisement in the American newspaper. So they were ambitious in overcome any kind of barrier to show their art. Okay, so these are the important people, and we will see more So this is what they call the one of the ritual performance where it shows it brings good luck to the place, and it's typical opener opera for a troupe when they go to a place to perform. So a lot of things to study in this playbill to show what the community or the Chinese immigrants thought of themselves, who they wanted to impress, and who they saw themselves as part of the community at large. And so this is numeracy, for those who study Asian American history, you will know this name because he's the person who really wrote this letter published in the newspaper when the governor, Buechler, had a really racist things to say in the newspaper and the legislature that he tried to pass. So he immediately took on this, so Nora Singh took on this responsibility to protest. And the next one is Tong Aching by this other guy. So I use these two examples. Their letters were very long and eloquent and really display the pride of Chinese being in this new land. But I use this maybe to show that it's the Chinese community leaders who were so interested in introducing Chinese opera to North America. And it was really them who sponsored the troupe. So from this beginning, you can tell they're not going to bring some terrible performer to come. They brought the best they could possibly afford to bring to North America, and they're going to show the land what it can do. So okay, let's see. You know what? Okay, so they perform in this theater for a whole week, and every day is a different kind of repertoire. And the price was very high at the beginning, higher than anything else we can find in that newspaper advertisement at that time. The price get cut a little bit because I guess the reality settled in. But in any case, they performed for a whole week. And then after that, you can see that December in New York, they did report about the theater. Why did they report about it? Because the theater, that first troupe, built their own theater. And it was very impressive that they actually had their own theater, that the news went across the continent to the other side and had a full report of it. And one thing I also would like to remind people is that the first Italian opera that was produced in San Francisco was merely 18 months before the Chinese produced their first opera. If you really think about it, opera production is expensive, right? So a lot of concerts were happening in San Francisco when it was the frontier. However, opera production was so costly that they didn't have that many of them. So you can see that it's only in 1851 the first opera production happened, and in fact in 1852 there's no Western opera production in San Francisco. Chinese was the only one. Okay, and subsequently then they have more. But I also like to have people remember or reconsider who really owns this land, who really had the right to establish here. Chinese didn't think they're second to anyone, really. When they came, they really just brought all they have from their cultural, and then, so this is really interesting for us to reflect on how early the Chinese opera really was part of this landscape. Okay, so the story continues. At that time, we don't have easy way to get to the East Coast, right? So the only way to do it is to really go from here to the south and then come up to here. So that troupe, all the more remarkable then, that troupe that we were talking about, that came from here to here, and the next thing they do, they come here to perform here. So that's what we're gonna see. So in 1853, the year after they arrived in North America, they went to New York to perform. And as you can see, this is this is Li Kung again, the guy we have seen before, and this is the troupe. Again, when we do this kind of research, the name is always the last thing to be nailed down because we don't know what romanization is going to happen to it. So it's really hard to really, do data research on some of these stuff. But anyhow, we know they were there and they performed. Unfortunately, they were cheated by their agent, who's a American East Coast agent, so they have to be disbanded. But I guess this goes to show, again, they were here as entertainment is very important. So after that first troupe came, many more came to the United States to perform, and they were performing in some of these theaters, and this is one of the ones that I can find from 1860. They were invited to play in this very famous McGuire Opera House. And here's another one that they perform at this Metropolitan Theater, and that is just several years. So sometimes they have really a very clear indication of what opera they play, but very often that's actually not as well laid out in the advertisement. Something to be said about this one though. This, for those of you who knows Cantonese opera, you recognize this is 六国大风向, so that's the opera they always play whenever the troupe arrive at a new place to perform beforehand. The next thing is actually something that I just did last night. This is an interesting advertisement from that opera theater. So if you look at this is a Metropolitan Opera, Metropolitan Theater. And you can see in this one is actually from 1867. And this is the advertisement for that one particular date. It's actually the end of September and the beginning of October. And from this, you will see this actually. This one is actually a Japanese troupe, and this one is a Chinese troupe. So the Asia performance were actually quite popular in California during that time. And I haven't had a chance to do a complete search on this, but I think this Japanese troupe performed for at least something like two weeks, whereas this Chinese troupe actually was kind of resident performers for that place for a long time. So you get an idea how continuous these Cantonese opera were actually in North America. And this is from one of the city directory, and you can see that they don't really have a name for the theater in this directory, but they indicate the location, right? So this is between Clay and Washington on DuPont, and this is between these two streets on Jackson. So we can trace a lot of their information from the city directory, but nothing more than a kind of a Chinese theater was named, very minimal information. And the English newspaper were actually very active in reporting about them. Mostly, it's not very flattering because they don't understand it, and they also have certain kind of racial, bias there. But sometimes you find something like this. This was as early as 1856, which I think is a time when the prejudice against Chinese was less pronounced. But this is actually this is actually an opera that still get to be performed today. It's called 薛平贵, 平贵归谣, and it actually described the theater really quite, the story quite well. So the English news press kind of have a combination of good coverage and also racially, stereotype kind of reportage. And whatever they are, they become the archive we have today to study this history. Because there's nowhere else we can turn to understand how Chinese opera theater was in the United States in the 19th century. So one of my tasks in studying this history is to seek out, good report like this, and also try to excavate information from the bad report. because even the bad report tells us about the size, about the repertoire sometimes, or about the instrumentation they use. But it is very important to separate out their bad impression about Chinese opera from the useful information in historical, evidence. So sometimes I would actually confess to my audience that I hate studying this history because it reads so many racial, denigration of Chinese in this report. But I want to urge you to understand those people putting those, really terrible report, not because the music is terrible, it's because their ear give them the impression or give them somehow the authority to name the music for what it is, right? So what they say about the music often is not true. And, but since that's the only archive we have for information, we should just try to be as careful as we are, but also as, productive as we can in excavating information. Okay, so the next part is about places beyond the San Francisco. So beyond San Francisco, as you all know, we have a lot of mining town and a lot of places, and they are the places where Chinese opera troupe went. In fact, we know that San Francisco was very much of a place where people use as an entryway to go into the interior, right? So this was actually very important to think about this little town and the ways that they were an important part of this history. In other words, we're rewriting the history of the music history of American West. Because why? Because this. This is a study done by Mei Nei, a book called The Chinese Question. I urge anyone who's interested in history to read it. And this is a map she shows to use the different sizes of the circle to show the size of Chinese population. Okay, so she identified in this interior town all these different places that has lots of Chinese. And guess what? They are the places where you can find Chinese opera, Chinese theater being mentioned in those newspaper reports I talk about. So from all the way up in Riverfield to all the way down to Mariposa and San Juan, there's tons of opera troupe just circulating among them. And if you read those newspapers, there are actually wonderful clues you can get. Some newspaper will talk about, a boat full of Chinese opera performers, and they're passing another boat up and down. Or some report will talk about how the Chinese opera troupe were leaving a particular town, and then they were, other Chinese who were, bidding them farewell at the dock, and then really showing the great appreciation for the opera they brought to this place. Another thing that's interesting for us to think about is that, and I can never really quite understand, is that Chinese opera requires a lot of costume. They're very heavy. And at that time, they don't have much in the ways of transportation, right? So steamboat is very important, and that's why they kind of go up here, right? By this boat to go up. But when they go up on the boat, get to the place, they typically still have to use wagon, horse, or just walk by foot, right? So they're very, very resourceful and really resilient. And as I said, this is only the beginning of the research. And from all those English newspaper reports, we can identify all these places have Chinese opera theater established at one point or the other. And here we can also see how dangerous it is. This is from a Western opera troupe, European opera troupe, that talks about how difficult it is to go from one place to another. And I want to also show you this is actually a lovely thing that I have just uncovered last summer, and therefore it's not exactly something that I could talk about very extensively. But this is a diary from a missionary person who went to Auburn to do his job. in his diary, he mentioned the Chinese theaters. And this is another example to show how we need to use a combination of news report and archival research to uncover a lot of these traces that are much, ignored by the general historian of American music. And this is from this particular missionary, and he did that particular day and talk about the existence of Chinese theater in a very interesting way. Okay, so this is the one broadside or poster from the 19th century that actually exists. It's in Huntington Library. And you can see it's actually showing in this Sacramento theater, which is existing theater that show other performances as well. But it had this broadside of Chinese troupe. So Sacramento and San Francisco actually share a lot of things in terms of a Chinese performance, juggler or opera. Typically, they come to San Francisco, they will go up to Sacramento as well to perform. And what I didn't actually mention was that there's sometimes the San Francisco that provide a kind of anchor for a lot of these troops to go, up to perform and then come back to San Francisco to perform and then do the circulation in interior town. So a lot of activity like that happen. Okay, so now we're back to San Francisco again with the next slide. This is a slide that actually is made famous because this picture was actually published in this Frank Leslie's weekly in Illustrated. And it's very important to think about the importance of visualization of Chinese theaters in this national kind of scale. Because Frank Leslie is actually a New York City publication. And it has become really famous as a kind of illustrated newspaper from Civil War, because they had sent reporter to paint the Civil War, and that's how the rest of the country understand what Civil War looked like, right? So they become very famous and very popular. The circulation number was about 70,000 per issue. They publish every week. And so in 1870, they sent the reporter and the staff artists to San Francisco, and they painted this. It's a painting that obviously brought back to New York and become engraved, and it's printed like this. And I like to show this particular broken one because this is the only one that's in the archive of digital archive of Frank Leslie, but also because with this, you can kind of understand that the usage of something like this, a print. Okay, so this is not your ordinary print. It's a full newspaper size. It's this big. And therefore, you need to fold it. And it's actually printed only on one single side. And so you have to fold it, and these are signs of usage, right? I keep opening and closing and folding together. And this is very interesting. There's a lot people can say about this. And I'm a very lucky recipient of a gift from a friend, which is that particular same poster that got painted during that time. And they obviously make it like this so people can use it at home for decoration. And it's really interesting to see all these things. And what I wanted to show is, in a later picture, is to show that these hairdo indicate very wealthy kind of family member. And these also are pictures that show Chinese really mixed with American audience. And there's a lot of different activities people are doing here. Very whimsical kind of painting out there. And of course, then you have the stage. You have the two typical doors, right? So this is a fabulous picture. I somehow put this one here, not really related, but this is the 六国大方向 that I talk about as the entry opera. And I also use this as a way for people to think about the opera costume. Opera costume at that time was very much a kind of very spectacular embroideries and colorful silk. They're very, very colorful like that. So to think about it in color is, I think, an important way to do this history justice. So going back to that thing, I want to show, these are actually pictures that were taken in by a photography studio in San Francisco by the name of Lei Yong. And you can see the hairstyle here is no different from what we saw in that poster. It goes to show that the wealthy class really was able to become the main patron of the opera theater, and that particular picture was actually quite interesting. Okay, all right. So I mentioned about that big theater, and that on that poster it simply say that it is a grand theater. Does it have a name? Yes, it does. Okay. So this gives you a sense of the four theater that was actually built purposely for performing Chinese opera. And the first one is this one. It's 1868. It was 1 year before the completion of the railroad, Transcontinental Railroad. And that Hing Chuen Yuen, that's a Hing Chuen Yuen, was the name of that big poster was painting. And the next one was only 6 years later, you get another one that's just about similar in size. And obviously their name changed, right? So you see this name change to this and this change to this, and that the initial one get changed here as well. So their name changed depend on who came or who owns and whatever. And just 3 years later, we get another new one. And the first two one are on the Jackson Street, and next two are on Washington. And this one is remarkable as far as history is concerned, because 1877, since we're in San Francisco, you all know about Sandlot riot, right? So that's the beginning of, Chinese must go, right? The workingman party. And that happened in July 1877. And this theater opened in December 1877. And the announcement of construction of this opera happened the day before the Sandlot riot. And it didn't slow them down, right? They decided to open a theater, and they will. So they did. And so I always thought this particular theater to be remarkable for that. It happened at a time, like the first theater which happened right before the completion of the railroad, this one happened at the height of, Chinese must go kind of environment. The next one is also special. It's special because it was the first one that was actually led and managed by an actor. It goes to show actor grew to become more important in the theater field. This actor was so popular that he was able to have enough sponsor to create a theater for himself. So this is a chart that I actually hide in the appendix of my book, which I much regret. I should have put it in the first thing that people see. I don't know if I made that decision, but now you know where to find it. It's in there. And it's really exciting to bring this together. Why? Because we actually are able to know their name. They're not just some generic Royal Chinese Theater. They actually have very, very particular names, and we'll find more story about that. So where were they? Well, they were here. So that's the first one, this is the second one, the third one, and the fourth. And according to the newspaper during that time, they can see something like 1,500 people. And some newspaper report of them sitting 2,000 people. I don't know about that. But one thing is sure, this is a very important entertainment for the community. They are the Taylor Swift, they are the Bruce Springsteen, they were, they are everything, right? So it's really amazing to think about the number of these opera theaters were so active. So at one point, 3 theaters would be performing at the same time. I don't have a record to show that all 4 were, having performance at the same time. At least 3. I have been able to confirm, and I'll tell you why that is. Next is actually opera performance pictures from Hong Kong. It is by another very famous photographer from Hong Kong by the name is Lai Feng. And I use this picture just to show these are the people that came to the United States to perform. If not exactly these 2 people, it's people who were wearing costumes as splendid as these. Because that's what they would bring. That's what the norm of Cantonese opera performance. And it's really remarkable to think about them. Okay, we start a general story of history of the Chinese theaters in North America between 1852 and 1880. Now I'm going to introduce you to one person. He's a theater goer. His name is Kun, and his Chinese name is Tan Cong Kun. So why is he important? Well, he arrived in the United States in 1868, and he first arrived in San Francisco, and then went to Santa Barbara and Alaska, and then he came back to San Francisco 1878. And from the chronology I was telling you, you can tell when it's 1868, there was only one Chinese theater really there. And by the time he returned in 1878, there were 3. And guess what? He went to all 3 of them. And he luckily left us all this diary for us to know his daily activity. It doesn't tell you much beyond daily activity, but that's enough. Because this is one of the few things that are actually authored by Chinese. It's in English with some Chinese mixed in it, and I have a lot of analysis about that in my book. So he spent 1878 to 1880 in San Francisco. And that is the period, if you remember from my map, that was very important for Chinese theater in San Francisco. Okay, so this is what he had written in his diary, and you can tell this is mainly English, but then also with Chinese character. And this happened to be a character in one of the operas that we will talk about. And this actually is the name of his own abbreviation for one of the Chinese theaters that we were talking about. And you can see here, there are names that he will give here and there, to do a lot. To read diary like this is tough, as you can imagine, pages and after pages. And guess what? I have a daughter who studied linguistics. So she helped me transcribe basically what I needed to learn. And these are very important things that without clear transcription of the diary, you cannot understand it. It really is very, very tough to do. But he told us a lot. All the names I was able to put on that previous slide was from his diary. We know exactly name, and then also activities he did. So if you pick up my book, the chapter you like the most will be the prologue. Because in the prologue, I say, he went to Chinese opera. He spent something like 80 hours in Chinese theaters in the last 3 weeks of December, something like that. And it's crazy, right? And how do we know that? Well, we conclude from what he had noted of his activities that day. And he actually gave us a lot of indication of why it is important. So this is, why do I show this? Well, it's because I want you to see this. These are the 3 theaters that he visited. And that's why his diary is so important to us, because it really helps us understand the coexistence of the 3 and how one theater goer can go from one to the other and enjoy both. And spend 3 hours in one, 3 hours in the other, and have a supper in the middle, or do things, related to that. And sometimes he would spend 5 hours in one theater. I don't know why he does it, but I think it's because you don't just watch opera in the theater. You do many things. You chat with friends, you have a snack, you do things, you probably doze off or whatever. But it's a place to go, right? It is a community center. It's a way of life. It's a way of life. Chinese theater is a way of life. And I think Kun really let us understand what that means. It's really remarkable. Okay, so more on Kun. So Kun, when he first got back to San Francisco, he didn't have a job, right? So that's why he can spend 80 hours in the theater for 3 weeks. But he got a job eventually. So he got a job where? So this is Chinatown, and he got a job here. A bit far, right? And he not only, this is only one of them, he got also another job in Angel Island, okay? So one of the things that we were able to tell from his diary is that he would fit opera watching in between his shift. He would, go to do the lunch chore, and then will, go see the opera in the afternoon and come back to do his evening chore. Or he would, spend overnight in San Francisco and go to see two theaters before he went back the next day. And oftentimes, however, he watched opera till 12 o'clock. And then typically after a night shift, he would go to the opera theater and see opera and have some supper himself. And then at 12:30, 1 o'clock, he went home. And sometimes he could take a train, sometimes he had to walk home. And we also, so I use his story to bookend my book. So the beginning was, how lively he was, and in the prologue, in the epilogue, I talk about one night that, one day, that was a Chinese New Year Eve. So he spent the day really very much in San Francisco and enjoy the various, visit to have candies like you do. And then in the evening, he was at a theater to see opera. Because opera is a place, it's kind of a surrogate family, right? So you have a room full of people next to you, all celebrating whatever's happening on stage. It's just lively. It's like, being with friends for people who didn't have family then. But someone played a trick and turned off the light before the opera concluded that evening. And then he had to walk home. And you can tell, just from 2 or 3 words, you can tell that he was so disappointed that he didn't get to spend, his ideal evening of a Chinese New Year Eve for that. So what did he have to do? Well, let's take a look. These are the theater that we have. So he basically had to walk and take train and do that. He misses so much that he does on the regular basis. And this is an opera watching record that's typically from his diary. He doesn't really tell you very much, But one thing that's really interesting to me is that he would talk about a lot of other things, including his cousin's name in English. But guess what? When they come to theater, he used Chinese words. And for those of you who sometimes have to switch in and out of writing Chinese, you know that writing Chinese is a very different experience from writing English, in the sense that you actually have to do the pen stroke, right? So actually it's a different embodiment of writing that brings him back to that operatic or that world of familiarity for him. And I think it's really remarkable. He either use abbreviation or use this Chinese word to indicate the theater that he went. It's a really something remarkable to think about someone like him. And I always feel like very lucky that we today have Aqua's diary to study. But just think about this. Look, he's exceptional that he writes it in English. But he's not exceptional as a theater goer. He was simply one of thousands of Chinese living in the community during that time, or in the larger San Francisco that time, that enjoyed us. And that's why there could be 3 theaters thriving at the same time. Because theater doesn't exist because it has sponsor. Theater exists because it has people who fill the seats. Right? So, Aquin left us remarkable things to study, but he's just one of thousands. And it's really important to envision what that theater looks like. I would love to see it myself. Aquin also left us a record of a particular opera. And I also want to play you this because this is opera that was actually recorded, this photograph was recorded in North America. So in 1903 was the beginning of what American record company called ethnic records. So they started to make ethnic record. So this is one of the ethnic record that was made by Richter company, and they have studio in Philadelphia, where they bring performers from New York to perform. And you can imagine that this is really representative of what talent they have in the community. Because they just bring this talent in the community to the studio to record and to make a record so they can sell everywhere they want. So let's listen to this a little bit. This is a duet from this particular opera. And this opera is also significant because for people who do Cantonese opera, they consider this particular opera a tier, what do you call that?
Charter.
That's right. So if you want to cry, be nostalgic, this is the opera you want to listen to get into the mood. Probably not this particular aria, but it's a duet between the old man and the woman who's looking for her husband.
要方向最近嘅往事，政府驗證論，多次驗個對夫，在夫最也做咩？那夫對嘅往事，正推那一天的坐在这里，方方样，不想见的人他来遇，在高兴那高兴的高兴回去。
So doing this research is about knowing what to look for. Guess where I find this recording? Anyone want to guess? YouTube, yes. But you just need to know that you're looking for this, and then you can find it. Okay. So one other thing I want to show you. So this is the name of theater I told you about. This is Sa-Sing is the an actor that he talked about elsewhere in this, and this is the name of the opera. And you look at this and this, they're not exactly Cantonese. So we think that this is the Taishanese rendition of this title. So he probably was, Taishanese in some ways. Okay, so the story from Akun is just amazing. I think we can learn more from him if people really study more closely what he had left us. Okay. Next, what I want to show is that we all know the Chinese exclusion 1882 had really become a big struggle. But one thing I want to share with you is that from my research, I think Chinese opera or Chinese theater was only getting more attention. This is an article called The Chinese Theater. It's by an author whose name is Henry McDowell. Henry McDowell was a son of a very famous general who was actually in charge of a Civil War general and was in charge of California in some ways. But he studied Chinese theaters very carefully. This long article talks about Chinese theater in very, very detailed and knowledgeable way. A lot to study from it. And not only that, he didn't do this on his own. This is a painting done by an artist called Theodore Wars. He's someone who actually made Chinese community a topic of his painting and become quite famous for it. And this is the painting that accompanied this particular article by Henry McDowell. And these on the right are also nice painting of this, and it's by another artist who never set foot on San Francisco. His name is, what's his name? Well, you can find it in my book. What's remarkable about this article is that it painted a Chinese theater in such a, what do you call that? Careful reportage, right? They paint a picture with a person with, integrity and compassion, and they write about them in an interesting way. And this actually give us some sense of what the performers were. So you have an accompaniment here, but this is actually a combination of two theaters. One theater has this, the other theater has this, and he combined them in this one picture. It's just fascinating how they did it. But Theodore Wars, I think was very important later for his painting of the Japanese kind of scenery, because he went to Japan later. And they're both of them are involved with this club called the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. And it's also a very interesting thing to think about how Bohemian Club actually generated a lot of interest in Chinese theater. They often visit. In fact, Theodore Wars moved a studio close to the Chinatown so that he can observe. And these are pictures that you can only paint if you observe closely. And I want to show that this particular warrior costume was so standard during that time. We saw it in the Hong Kong picture, and here again, verified. That's what's performed in North America as well. So Chinese theater also got attention of an advocate whose name is Wang Qingfu, and he at that time was a strong advocate that talks about how Chinese theater, how Chinese should be treated like a citizen and have equal opportunity and civil right like others. And he, at one point, decided Chinese theater is a good way to go about it. So he advocated for Chinese theater to be brought to the East Coast. But as I had mentioned before, Chinese actors also became important toward the end of the around 1880. So there's one Chinese actor who actually just took the train by himself to go to Philadelphia and trying to bring theater to East Coast. They just recognized this is going to be something important. And eventually they did. So this was 1891, they finally did. So a troupe really got established on the East Coast. They took the whole trip from Portland, of all places, and to Chicago and performed there for several days, and to Philadelphia and performed there for several days, and then arrived in New York. And as you can see that they perform up in Boston as well. And this is an important picture for me because it shows that at that time, people's attitude toward Chinese theater is one of ethnic interest. So this is a visit that's reported widely from a particular performance for American Folklore Society. And this was only the second year, I believe, that a particular society was established. And so in 91, since there were Chinese theater in Boston, they decided to have a special trip. And then the Boston Globe, reported very in great detail, and then full, like 2/3 of a page was a reportage about this. And when the troupe was performing in New York, they also got the attention of fashion magazine. So you can see this, female kind of performer being featured on the cover of this particular magazine. You have people performing inside. And also in this issue, there's an article talking about how Chinese costumes were made, and if you want to make one for yourself, and this is what you do kind of thing. Of course, it's a very, digester version of that, and that was really interesting. And this is actually in Doyer Street. They have a Chinese theater picture. This is a picture that has long been housed at the Library of Congress. And it's really shows, so this place still exists. And it's no longer a Chinese theater, as you can imagine. It's actually a bar. And just recently, the bar had, showcased the fact that it was a Chinese theater before. So if you have a chance to go to New York, go to check it out to see how they feature it. But what attracted my attention is actually what's on the wall. The wall shows a playbill of that time. And this playbill is nothing other than the red Chinese chamber, the red chamber. So you all know that story. And so you all know that San Francisco Opera had a production of Red Chamber, right, just several years ago. And if you think about it, Red Chamber as a story was performed in North America this early, and also in the 21st century. So it's actually a tale that has been told by many. Many different occasions, many different kind of troupes, many kind of genre of music. So just going back to show this picture, famous picture again, Bancroft Library has a copy that's online. You can easily look it up. And then Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento also has a copy, and it's framed. It's very similar to the one that I have. And the coloring is very similar to the one I have. The only difference is the one column. The one column, it didn't have a color red, but mine was color red. So it goes to show a poster like this was created for people to really enjoy at home. And another thing that really is is important to think about is that when this picture was circulated in North America through the magazine, it was the first encounter of Americans with Chinese theater in the visual sense. Before that, they can only read about it. So this picture really gives them a sense of what it looks like in California and what San Francisco's biggest attraction look like. So it has many ways to think about that. So that's 19th century, and 20th century brings us a different kind of, popularity and mobility. So in my first book, I talk about all the different theaters that were established in these cities, right? So it has a huge performing network, and this is a picture of the playbills that are published by various different things. And many of you know that in San Francisco, they play different opera every night, right? So here we have one from every different city. So this one is from Poland, this one from Seattle, you can see it's bilingual. And this one I think is from Hawaii, and this one is from New York, this one is from San Francisco. And the costume obviously is very elaborate. One thing that is different for in terms of the 20th century is that they have a lot of actresses. So in the 19th century it was mostly men playing both female and male roles, but in 20th century it's a different story. So that's a very elaborate. And earlier on, David and I visit many people who are descendant of opera performers, or staff worker, or just fans. So this is a scrapbook belong to one of the fans that you can tell on the right is on the left is one particular performer in also a different stage. And of course, as we have already documented very well in various places, Google Cultural included, that the main studio is responsible for a lot of these pictures, right? And they were very much, so you would say, why do they take this picture? Well, they were put on playbill, they were put on newspaper, they were put on everywhere for people to look at. So one person I interviewed during that time told us that she and her sister would come home from school, and her father is a tailor. So one of the playbill would be distributed to her father's store. So they would grab this playbill, and it would have some of these pictures on it, obviously, and they would see who's playing that night. So those playbills were a very important part of the picture. And there's another person who we interviewed told us that her grandfather was the person who distributes playbills at 12 o'clock every day to the different places. And that really tell us the ways in which it was important part of life. So because of these playbills and things, photographers were taking regular pictures of the stage production for people to see. So here's one, here's another one, and this shows that they didn't just perform old stories. They put new spin on the stories, and we can never tell who this guy was supposed to be, but we know he's part of the story, right? And of course, this kind of backdrop was also not something that was from the tradition, quote unquote. They invent them to make themselves attractive. And then these are this is a costume that's actually from University of British Columbia. They have an anthropology museum that has a lot of these that are beautiful. Okay, so these would actually have something to show. This is a Mandarin Theater. When it opened, it became a news, so it was in the news. about this. It was